Right. So that's kind of building on, way back from, from the days where we talked about a philosopher king, or from in the earliest of time has been how do we get the wisest to be available, and how do you choose who's really wise? That
Yes.
starts becoming the problem and the thorn in that. But some kind of interactive process of the people of the planet sounds like giving us perhaps the best hope to begin to evolve that. Well, tell us a little bit more. There have been, I remember back in high school reading a World Constitution by Clark and Sowen, and there have been various
Hmm.
people who've developed various proposals for Earth constitutions over the years. How is this different, and how was this particular one created?
Well, I've looked at it, over my history as a professor of philosophy, at the university, specializing in the philosophy of law is one of my areas. Um, I've looked at these other constitutions, and there's nothing inherently flawed. The political system can be organized in different ways. And if you look at the constitutions, for example, of European nations, they are organized in different ways. And there's nothing inherently bad, but in my view, this constitution is extraordinary. It is designed so well. It doesn't mean that that maybe myself or yourself might object to this or that provision, but overall, it's beautiful, and I think it's beautiful in a way that would make it an effective unifier of humanity and an effective means by which we can deal with our lethal global problems.
It came out of a process, you said, of tens of thousands of people from 120 countries being involved.
Philip Isley and his wife Margaret Isley and a few other World Federalists after the Second World War. Philip Isley was in jail in the Second World War because he refused to fight in this. He said this is a war of sovereign nations, and we need world government. So he already in the Second World War he was for this. So in 1958 they founded the World Constitution and Parliament Association with the goal of writing a constitution for the earth. And they had, Philip and Margaret Isley had a successful business in Denver, Colorado. And they used the funds from that business to contact people around the world, people known as world citizens, were international lawyers, people like Max Habeck, the famous World Federalist lawyer, and so on. And they brought them together in preliminary meetings, in all kinds of interactions about this theme, about creating the World Constitution. And then they held the first, what we call constituent assemblies, the first constituent assembly in Interlaken, Switzerland, 1968. And at that meeting, people from all over the world elected a drafting committee of 25 persons, and it was chaired by Dr. Reinhard Ruga of Mexico. And this drafting committee was charged by the group who met there in Switzerland, charged with what they wanted in the Constitution. They wanted such and such about human rights, such and such about Parliament, and so on. And so after 1968, that group began working on writing the Constitution. And as they wrote drafts, they sent out the drafts to this body of people around the world for their responses, for their input, and so on. And after doing this a couple of times, 9 years later, in 1977, they met in Innsbruck, Austria, and they had the first draft of the Constitution there in front of them. And they went over it paragraph by paragraph and discussed the wording and so on. And they came out with what they finished with was the first draft of the Constitution. And there was tremendous excitement. And they began sending it out worldwide and so on, to heads of nations. But it really wasn't finished, and they began to realize that it wasn't finished. Um, People still had ideas about what might be
How many
improvements.
improvement conferences and things have happened since then?
Well, it was, there were two more after that. That was the second Constituent Assembly. The third was in Colombo, Sri Lanka, 1979. And then the fourth and final one was in Troia, Portugal in 1991.